is the fictional mindbender. There is a common question that comes up in the Star Wars franchise about Leia's force potential. That is, that even though she is the daughter of Darth Vader just as much as Luke is the son of Darth Vader, we don't get or hear about much of her force potentials or any strong showings of the force. Like, that being said, it is being commonly accepted lately among many fans that Leia is actually stronger in the Force than Luke. Of course, all this depends on who's writing the story, but there you are. But I thought I'd look at that and ask that question and look at the facts and see if that was actually true, just as a fun experiment. So let's start with taking a step back and look at the family dynamic first, starting with her parents. Leia, as we all know, is the daughter of Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala, and therefore she probably would have inherited just as much strength of the Force because of that. But then, power is only part of the story. Anakin was headstrong and overly confident, relying on his abilities to carry him through to the end, but he was also quick-tempered, and believed his motivations to be just and that they justified any actions he did, rarely ever questioning his resolve. When he was open to counsel, it was only from a small number of people, and even then only those he was actually close to. Breaking that trust or offending it in any way was a severe offense that was not easily forgotten or forgiven. Many of his peers interpreted these qualities as arrogance. However, these same aggressive traits also made the Jedi prodigy a great leader. He was capable of taking charge when the situation called for it, inspiring others under him to follow him to hell and back, which oftentimes was literally. And where he didn't rely on his Force powers, Anakin would instead resort to his charisma and force of will, which were also considerable. In contrast, Padme was less aggressive but just as firm of mind. Her confidence was a passive part of both her political training and her personality. Rarely did she ever feel the need to impress upon others her abilities or need for affirmation. Over time, though, these occurrences became less. When she was decisive, then, like Anakin, her mind was impossible to change. But for all her single-minded moments, she still had much more forethought than her husband did, who was more reliant on instinct and the Force. So, how does this affect Leia as their daughter? Well, early in the original trilogy, Leia quickly establishes more of her father's personality than her mother's, minus her size and appearance. She is quick-witted in the face of danger, even when her life is under direct threat from the likes of Darth Vader and Moff Tarkin. She openly insults a Wookiee who could easily tear her to shreds, and shows disdain to those who she despises. She is also quick to take charge when she feels the leadership is failing. She doesn't suffer fools lightly, such as during the almost ill-fated rescue from the Death Star, and deciding to kill Jabba during the sail barge battle. And, decades later, if you follow the sequel trilogy, immediately quelling a mutiny on the Raddus by shooting and stunning Poe Dameron. Leia's stubbornness was also rather infamous. The harder you pushed against her when she was trying to tell you something, the harder she would push back, and this was the foundation of her relationship with Han Solo, who shared similar traits. She was also just as charismatic as Anakin, able to inspire others to follow her orders by hope in spite of overwhelming odds, or by her own sheer force of will. And she acted on this as well, being at the forefront of the battlefield when the situation called for it without hesitation. Padme's influence, however, slowly comes out over time. Leia was capable of masking her confidence and her power. Her inherited small frame helped her out in this capacity because of her, seemingly anyway, weakened appearance. Though she would be boastful, she normally didn't demand attention unless it was a distraction, when she lost her temper, or, in extreme cases, when she's actually trying to kill you. She barely concealed her distrust of Lando in Cloud City while still remaining civil, and controlled her rage until the right time when she gave Lando the death stare after Han was frozen and captured and almost had Chewie kill him for it. Leia also had a greater sense of situational awareness than her brother and her father did. She often had a plan for her actions and rarely haphazardly jumped into action cold. Like both her parents, she was fiercely loyal, often going to great lengths for them, even when it would have been more prudent to leave them behind. Leia is often seen as being the better Jedi trainee because, therefore, she was more composed than Luke was and complained less, quite honestly. She was already more of a leader and had the experience and training to boot by the time of Star Wars A New Hope. However, these traits also, I believe, would have been hindrance to her training in a mystical form that she had only heard stories about and had no prior experience with, at least up until the Kenobi series, if you follow that. According to George Lucas, Leia represented the more practical aspects of life, whereas Luke represented the more spiritual side. Luke clearly had issues with this when he was trying to raise the X-Wing from the swamp. He believed in the Force, but only as an agent bound by the laws of the physical plane, and Leia would have been more prone to this, given her training and that she always had had a plan for everything from an early age. To rely on instinct and believe just because didn't track with her very well, like what happened on the Death Star. There is a saying in some martial arts circles about training students who already think they know everything they need to know, a cup that is already half full. It would be fair to say that seeing the Force as a tool rather than a mystical semi-sentient agent is a Skywalker trait. Then, of course, there is the fact that she also shares the Skywalker temper. She may not be as whiny as her brother and her father were when they were younger, but she is just as quick to explode. Anger is probably the strongest family trait other than the strength in the Force. And, given that part of Yoda's training is to push his students harder, given the galactic circumstances at the time, Leia would have probably lost her temper at some point just like her brother did. She has to be forced into a situation in order to believe something. She only believed in the Force and that Vader was her own father when Luke forced that knowledge on her on Endor. She couldn't run from it or have time to go into denial about it. Luke had to be called out many times, but he was still a quick study afterwards. Easy to accept after that. Having said that, I don't think Leia would have been as quick to fall into Vader's traps like Luke did on Cloud City. She probably still would have confronted the Sith Lord had she been there instead of Luke, but on her own terms rather than being led by the nose like her brother was. And speaking of Vader, she definitely would have killed him. Leia had her entire planet destroyed, and Vader was party to that, minus the reputation he already had established. Plus, he had also tortured her on the Death Star and Han in Cloud City. Given her temperament, as I've already discussed, she would have gone along with Kenobi's and Yoda's plan to just kill Vader despite the familiar relation because of her own experiences alone, and they would have prevented her seeing any good in him whatsoever. As far as any shows of Force goes, pardon the pun, she more than likely would have been more settled about it, and not as open as Anakin and Luke were. Her political training, after all, called for her to play down her hand when it can gain the most advantage, and Leia could accomplish more with her own force of will than force choking someone. I believe her power is equal to Luke's because of, again, being twins, but how it would have been used would have been different. Leia would have been more likely to focus on diplomacy and subtlety, rather than any kind of swordsmanship or displays of force. A more aggressive show, however, would come into play when she lost her temper, and then you might see Leia start to force choke someone or become more threatening and more open about her force abilities. At least so I believe. But, to sum it all up, Leia would have been a powerful Jedi and just as powerful as Luke was. But she would have used it much more differently and come to her own with it much more differently as well. I don't think it would have made her stronger, as some would like to say, but it definitely would have been equal in power, just, again, used and applied differently. It would take longer to train her because of the training she already had. She may still lose her temper, even if less so than Luke, and she probably would not have disagreed with Kenobi and Yoda about sparing Vader because of her own past trauma hindering the larger, more mystical picture that was at stake. Leia would have definitely provided definite advantages in training, but I think it would have taken longer for her to take hold because of her previous experiences, and would have just given Yoda a different set of problems than he had with Luke. Now, having said all that, this does not make her less than Luke. It just makes her different, despite the fact that they are both twins. But beyond that, what do you guys think? Do you think Leia actually is stronger in the Force than Luke? Let me know in the comments below. This is Fictional Mindbender. You guys have a good day.